The phrase reorganisation underpins so much of what we do at Jones Miller in terms of reorganisations of share capitals, demergers, reconstructions, share exchanges, management buyouts. A lot of the work we do involves share reorganisation, so I thought I'd go back to basics, talk about the concept of a reorganisation and what it means. So reorganisation is defined in section 126 of TCGA. It's not the most helpful of definitions because it actually says that a reorganisation is a reorganisation or reduction of share capital. So that bit's not very helpful. Some of the main concepts to be clear on are the idea that there is a proportionality. So before and after whatever we're doing with the shares needs to be in proportion, generally with a specific class of shares. If we have an alphabet share class, anything we do with that needs to be in proportion to the class as a whole. It's not necessarily just restricted to shares, so the idea of a reorganisation can include shares or debentures. So if you reorganise share capital or preference shares into loan notes or vice versa, they can fall within reorganisations. We've also got a list in section 126. It's a fairly short list and it says that it can include, so the word include means it's not an exhaustive list, but effectively it tells us that things like a rights issue is likely to be a reorganisation, a bonus issue, which means an issue of shares without payment, whereas a rights issue is with payment. Both of those are likely to fall within reorganisations. Why does it matter whether something is a reorganisation? Well, the first thing is that if it falls within the definition of a reorganisation, section 127 tells us that the new securities that we hold are standing in the shoes of the old. That means the original purchase date applies as to the new securities as it did to the old, as does the base cost. Things like business asset disposal relief, which require a 2-year holding period, mean that if we didn't have this reorganisation rule, we'd have to do our reorganisation and then wait 2 years before we could do anything with the shares if we wanted to qualify. The same principle applies to BPR for inheritance tax purposes as well. If consideration is given for the shares, section 128 tells us how to deal with that. So for instance, on a rights issue, we had the case of Vinton, where they did a rights issue when the lady was on her deathbed, inserted cash into a BPR qualifying company with a view to treating that as a reorganisation. The cash is now outside of her estate because business property relief applies to it. The reason that worked is because the cash consideration is treated as being given for the original shares which she'd held for years, and therefore BPR applied to the rights issue shares from day one.